Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Improv Network podcast. This is a series of conversations aimed at making stronger connections throughout the improv community. I am James Quesada.
I'm Bob Wick.
And we are your education team for the Improv Network. You can go to theimprovnetwork.org and check out all the resources we got to offer. Of course, there's profiles for yourself and your team and your theater and your festivals and whatnot. There's also blogs and the Improv FAQ tab, which will give you a bunch of this video content, this and lecture series as well. Okay, well, any updates, Bob? How are you doing? I missed last week.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
No, we had a really amazing conversation as always with Shannon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she taught me a lot as always.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Started a couple new jobs in audio, a podcasting studio job. So that's been pretty cool. And just trying to do like everybody else, just trying to juggle a lot of shit to get through this as we maybe see the light at the end of the tunnel of the pandemic. I'm trying to get my footing again.
I just got my notification. I'm eligible to go get my shot. So after this, I'm going to see how I can get that accomplished. I was supposed to have this week off. I got called back into work. So I'm, getting my shot, I think is more important than building a car. So it's going to happen. Yeah.
Awesome. I got my first shot last week. I was able to get one in the middle of the night.
Are you sure you got the right shot? That's sketchy. In a dark alley.
It was it was around 3 a.m. in the middle of the Bronx, very secluded area in an alley. It was great.
Van pulls up, some guys like, here, kid.
It really was at 3 a.m. in the middle of the Bronx, though, at a some postal center that was a 24-hour vaccination place now. But yeah, so it's apparently a good time to go if you can handle the lateness of it, because I went in and there's like 4 or 5 other people there, and I was in and out in no time. I go back the 20th is when I get my next one. So pretty good.
Yeah, I think I'm going down to Ford Field to get mine.
Oh, cool.
That's gonna be cool. And for those of you listening, there are a lot of programs I've been hearing about. I've signed up for that as well. Like a lot of these places, for some reason people are missing their appointments and stuff, so they have extra doses. So at the end of the night, they don't want to waste it. So you can, if you have time and you can show up there, there's a slight possibility you can get you some.
Yeah, it's good. Getting on waiting lists is pretty important and easy enough. So, but okay, on to the topic at hand. Bob and I are going to be talking as a sort of follow-up extension to our conversation about 3-person scenes that we did a few weeks ago.
Right.
We're going to be talking about group scenes, and we in the conversation of 3-person scenes, we talked about the dynamics of 2 versus 1 and all for one and one for all, right, where you either have everybody on with the same perspective in the scene in a 3-person scene, or each of the 3 players has a distinct different perspective, which could be a little tough to handle, but doable and a fun way that scenes can go too. And I suppose to kind of get the conversation started, I'll say that a lot of that stuff applies to group scenes more than 3 people. It just kind of keeps going, is that you can have a half and half, or you got 5 people in a scene, and it could be like 4 on 1, and it could be all 5 people in the same boat, or it could be 5 individual perspectives and whatnot, and the same challenges or sort of a description of what happens is pretty similar to what we talked about in 3-person scenes.
The whole either everybody's on the same page, or there's 2 sides to the same coin and everybody picks a side, but some people flip-flop, or there's everybody has their own perspective of the situation. So you can have the same goal but different approaches, so your tension's there. Or it could be more situational as far as location, and you can just do more of a character study, and this is the character I am, and this affected me some type of way. So i.e. like you're a wedding scene, obviously, most commonly the best day, it should be the best day for the folks getting married. Might not be the best day for the father of one of the people getting married, depending on their feelings about the person that their son or daughter are getting married to, or whatever. So we can go through that their emotions and how it's tied up to this event or location, and play off of that.
Yeah. And I think for the most part, like, it's like pretty tricky the more perspectives you add into it. So I guess one good piece of advice, if for anyone that is like intimidated by group scenes, or feels like they get lost in them, it's a good idea to keep it simple and latch on to somebody else's perspective if there's already been perspectives established. I honestly, I just think that it's like a really underutilized thing to have a group scene where everybody just is on the same page. Like we all are bitching about work, or we're all having the best day of our lives at a wedding, or whatever. Like,
which could be exciting if seeing people enthused about something that people usually aren't enthused about is fantastic to me. Some of my favorite documentaries are the ones where people get really good at a thing that isn't useful except for winning a world record. Like I watched one the other day about rock skipping and how competitive these guys got, but also how sweet they were to each other. Like, man, I skipped a rock 47 times. No one's ever beat that until Jim did, but he's a good guy, so I'm just gonna have to give him next year, and I love that. Like, yeah, man, get him next year. You do, yeah. I hope you do, and then I hope he gets you the year after, and I hope this continues forever.
But he's a good guy, so I guess I got to get him next year.
Yeah, I'm sure that's not even I added the accent. That's not how they talked. It's been a while. I apologize.
No, that's great. Yeah, I think that can be interesting. I think another uncommon and helpful thing is that it can be kind of like the politeness. What do you call it? Politeness.
Polite play. That's usually I refer to it.
Yeah. It's whatever. It's
being socialized, being civilized.
Just improvisers tend to get really polite with each other when sometimes it would be helpful to not be as polite. Whatever. There's a single word that I'm missing in my brain right now to describe this. But anyway, the syndrome, maybe politeness syndrome.
Okay.
Sometimes we want to give everybody an even role in a group scene.
Right.
You don't have to have an even role, and it's probably wise not to. There should probably be only a couple people in focus, and some people don't even have to speak. Sometimes people would prefer not to as players, just a stylistically thing. I know our good friend Gary Lehman lots of times likes to be somebody who is just establishing a backdrop and sort of being an extra in a scene to build the reality of the world out. But if he walks on stage in a 3-person scene, he's not intending to add to the focuses and perspectives. He's just intending to add to the backdrop of the world.
or heighten whatever's going on, maybe to this might be what you're looking for.
Politeness paradox. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, we hit it at the same time.
We did, yeah.
Moody, thank you.
Yeah, hey, Moody. Yeah, maybe it's the politeness paradox that I'm going for.
Right.
Go ahead.
So were we? Oh, yeah. Gary adding to the overall environment. When teaching these types of scenes, I like to use the Christopher Guest movies as an example, because there we have a group of interesting characters, and they all meet at a location. You know, you have Mighty Win. These are a bunch of groups. They're like scenes within scenes, but we're all meeting at the same location. Or, you know, Best in Show. We're all going to the dog show. This is, but we get little snippets of these characters and how they interact with each other. And then how these, groups of characters interact with in a bigger sense. And you get to see the full picture. And the general advice I give, pick a point of view and just stick with it and see how that can grow and how that helps the story. And honestly, try to gauge how much your audience wants to see it. Don't turn it off, but don't, if someone's story is really interesting and unique, you might not want to jump in there as much as that person, or vice versa,
Yeah, I like to think that for all intents and purposes, you can treat the beginning of a 3 or group scene the same as a 2-person scene, and it's probably a good starting place to do that. Is just be like, you don't have to take the burden of deciding what's going on with everyone, or how you're going to include everyone, or what your feelings are about everyone right away. Probably just put your attention on one other person, and then as the scene develops naturally, and people, sort of introduce themselves or establish whatever they choose to, you can then kind of like figure that out as you go, aka improvise.
Now, let me ask you this:
Yeah.
do you consider split screen scenes as group scenes? Because I do, but I don't know if that's
Yeah, I think so. I think again, like, so let's define split screen is like you've kind of got 2 separate scenes going on the same stage, but there's like an invisible split screen or barrier between them. They're in different locations. Yeah, bouncing back and forth between the focusing of those 2 scenes, right?
Right. The actors themselves in the real world are standing on stage by each other, but our suspension of disbelief is supposed to treat it as if these are 2 different scenes happening in the same world, approximately the same time, but same storyline, but different locations, and as if like the old school movies where they show 2 things happening at the same time. They call them split screen.
Yeah.
So what you said,
I think, which I love those, and yeah, definitely would consider those group scenes. Okay. And there's a lot of like give and take between that. It's and it's sometimes a little bit more difficult because you got to make sort of stylistic choices on the fly, or have talked about it before with your team. Like, right? Do you kind of like freeze and go on mute when you bounce, when you steal focus back and forth, or do you mouth words just silently, or so that can sometimes be tricky with split scenes, but
right.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference? Like when you're coaching or when you're in a split screen, do you do the word mouthing thing, or do you freeze?
I would rather do the word mouthing thing, honestly.
Me too.
Okay. Me
too. To me personally, and it's just a preference, I think it looks less jolting when you do start to talk. And if the however many people who are sharing that the entire scene are on the same page and are good at give and take, it can look really smooth. You always have the options of going back to like your object work or whatever. And when you are mouthing words, probably don't overdo anything unless you're making an interesting choice, or you're doing this on purpose to distract or heighten. Yeah.
It's tricky, and I think that I wouldn't do it that way necessarily if I'm playing with like a new group or as a guest in somebody else's group.
Yeah.
I would probably sooner sort of dial down like the mouthing of words and the physical movement, and even like the amount of time that's like passing. You just kind of like dial it down to a 3 before while you're not in focus, and then you can kind of pick it up where you left off or whatever.
Right.
But I think that yeah, if I'm like coaching a team that's together and playing with a team that like is like wanting to make this part of the form or whatever, I would rather be like, let's kind of toy with how much we can bounce back and forth, focus, but also kind of like playfully challenge where the focus is. Like,
and I've seen split screen scenes. Ooh, that's hard to say 3 times fast. I've seen them where maybe okay. This is not a scene, but this is my example would be there is 2 characters inside a kitchen. There's 2 characters who are outside of the bakery. The 2 outside the bakery are having a calm conversation, and then all of a sudden, while this conversation is happening, maybe something gets lit on fire. So you have like almost a silent scene going on, and that's wild and crazy. But you have this really calm, and so you have that adjusted position type deal where it's one is heightening the other by being the complete opposite. You know, the words don't match the actions of what else is going on stage. So that's another possible. But I wouldn't do that for every time I did a split screen. I wouldn't make that my thing, but I think that it's cool when it doesn't get pulled off.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, split screens is definitely, that's a good thing to include in the conversation of group scenes.
Okay.
Yeah, because I didn't even think of that when we landed on this topic, but that's a really great like thing to point out is the challenge of the give and take.
Right.
But again, I gotta say that like it basically is like a 2-person scene. Just focus on your especially initially what's going on in your half of the stage. You don't have to figure out like keep your ears open while the other scene's going on, but like it's not your job to like sort of steer anything.
No.
The more you can focus on your scene and just pay attention to punctuation that might allow focus to shift. Right. That's really, for all intents and purposes, it's just its own scene and focus is shifting back and forth. Keep it simple.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then also thinking about group scenes, it reminds me, we had a conversation with Christine Pinheiro, a friend of mine out here, that about relationships, and I think we talked about group scenes, and she brought up that one thing she loves to do with group scenes is just make sure that she has a different relationship, a different game with each person in a group scene, so that like when Grandma enters the room, that she's more endeared to Grandma, but then when Ted enters the scene, she's pissy with Ted or whatever. Like, and I think that that's a really great approach to it too, rather than thinking about like the perspective thing. I think it's almost like a different angle on like the how 2 versus 1 or all for one, one for all kind of stuff applies to a group scene. You can also just make it about relationships, leading with that dynamic first. And I think giving yourself the gift of like, hey, just having a clear, distinct emotion tagged with everybody in the scene is a really great route to go to, especially if what you're doing is like a longer group scene, whether it's a mono scene or you just tend to do fewer scenes in a longer show.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Because every time you can filter your want through your relationships and having a stronger relationship than your want is always an interesting, like that internal conflict is fascinating to me. Mm-hmm. And then having to do that whole show the range the more conflict or the more emotions or more relations or you have to include in that. That's always fun. It's and interesting. And like using your example, yeah, you're talking nice to Graham, but then Ted walks in, and you have to, if you change your demeanor, you have to change your physical presence and everything, your tone for that person, and then split it at some point to go back and forth. That's great. Or does one heighten and one tone down, and you kind of find a middle ground? That's interesting.
Yeah. I think that's a really fun way to do it. Again, I guess I would just say that like, it as long as that isn't making you kind of like panic to make a bunch of choices, and putting you in your head, right. That's a really great way to kind of give yourself automatic dynamics and keep things like interesting but still grounded when it's about what your feeling is and how you're directing it toward people. But again, absolutely. If it puts you in your head and you're just like, I gotta make all these choices, and it feels like I'm just freaking writing the scene or whatever, then then just focus on one person at a time, and just like All for One, where everyone is on the same perspective or whatever, you can use that approach and just be like, I'm just gonna love everybody. I just want to support everyone. I'm just gonna be like, that's my thing for everyone. It doesn't need to necessarily change if it's something that puts in your head to try and juggle that way.
Here's an exercise I've done a few times, and it sounds easy when I explain it, but it's very hard for people who have trouble playing a vulnerable character or just showing emotion, right? It's almost exactly what you're talking about, having a new emotion or just the same emotion for every character, but at different degrees. And you have to show that, so you can do it a different bunch of ways. Like you can put numbers 1 through 10 in a hat. Have have whoever is coming in, pick a number, give it to you. So that's the degree of, if you want to do one emotion, that's the emotion, that's the relationship. That's what you got to project towards that person, no matter what's going on the entire time. And it's never going to change. Mm-hmm. So that's how you start. And then you can start doing like, all right, half of these people you love, half of these people you hate, and all at different emotions. At what level? And then you have to keep it there. And then you can go to have a different emotion for everybody, have a different relationship. Then from there, have a different relationship, but you have a want that can be manipulated. So it could be something easy. I'm a child. I hate everybody, but I want candy. First person that brings me a piece of candy, I love. So then you have to show that switch. And it gets hard. It gets hard because people have a hard time showing that. Even when they're playing a fake character who hates, loves, is angry with another character that doesn't exist. Like, it's not real. We're just pretending. Yeah.
I love that though. I love doing the like degrees. Those kind of exercises are really great. I used to really hate them, to be honest.
I agree.
Doing like the family dinner scenes or whatever, where it's like this is like the status, and then we're gonna switch. But it really is like, I guess maybe I just got bored with that particular dynamic. But like you could do it. Another simple way to do it is like in a car doing like a road trip kind of thing. Or like I think simplifying the location and making it something conventional and familiar is really useful. So you can just focus on those like emotion and relationship dynamics and whatnot. That is helpful, but like, I suppose I just like to mix up what the location is. But anyway, I think that exercise is really great, and playing with, starting simple and then going between, let's add in a few different feelings directed at people, and then definitely playing around with like the degrees, because it doesn't have to shift so radically between like, I'm really happy about this person, and then I hate this person. It can be, it can be
then
more
you get
nuanced.
like interesting relationships because what if one person starts pretending or picks a character as the boss character, and the usual thing would be, the work, the boss, but what if you absolutely love the boss? This is the best boss ever, and it might not be reciprocal, but it's a thing. And then the next person comes in and it's your mom, and you hate her, and it's a really it's what made this character,
Yeah.
Why is this person walking around? That's kind of creepy.
Yeah. Quick hello to Pete.
Hey, Pete.
Loves our mugs.
Yes, he does.
Oh, you got the Go Comedy mug. Yeah, that's great.
This is specifically the Go Comedy Run for Laughs happening this May.
Oh, it's going again?
Yeah, yes.
Awesome.
They just started working on it. We can talk more about this at the end.
Yeah, commercial break.
Commercial. It, you know what? As a group, everybody's running together and virtually.
Yeah, do an exercise with group dynamics where you are running a marathon. No, that's great though. And then hi, hey Pete, thank you for complimenting the mugs. It really is a point of pride for us here on the Improv Network podcast. I don't get enough love for this Marauders map mug, and it is Julia's, yes, but I think that it is the coolest. I have no competing mugs of my own.
Oh man, you got.
So here's with the group scenes. Do you have any other exercises? I really like, just kind of talking about the general stuff that happens on stage, but also like how to exercise this stuff is super important. And I really like that exercise you were talking about. I'm trying to think of some others that I would use. We talked a little bit about split screening and,
a really good one. I think we talked about this one before. Is we start a scene, and at some point I'll stop the scene, and I go to each person, and hey, just break down your character. Give and we'll just do what's the things I can see from the other character's point of view. I'm a 40-year-old auto worker wearing a gray hoodie. Cool. What have we learned so far about this character? He wants to go to lunch. Cool. Why does he want to go to lunch? He's hungry. Why? Because he's been building cars all day. Okay. All right. So so he's starving because he's exhausted and he probably wants some comfort food, right? Right. Okay. So at the end of every sentence you say, it's because I want comfort food. Because all I want is comfort food. And even if it doesn't make sense, it kind of grounds that character. We ground that character. And I just go to every character and we ground them. And then we kind of find, after it's been my experience, after we do this and we start the scene again, it kind of grounds itself because everybody's want is clear, and they don't add extra wants, and no one really can shake the want that the person has. So everybody's kind of has to meet each other halfway. Cool.
Yeah.
How about you? Great. You got anything for the folks at home to work on, to exercise with? I don't know why I said it that way. You got anything for the kids? Any exercises for the youngins? Huh?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of to be honest, I'm trying to think of stuff that could be translatable to virtual rehearsals. Because one that I really like is just having everyone in the group is in the scene, and you do a series of scenes like that where you just rearrange yourself on stage, be doing something in a location, and figure that out together. But then only 2 or 3 people are going to be speaking in the scene or in focus. And then, so that's a nice way to get comfortable with the idea of just playing background or not feeling the pressure to mitigate, 7 characters and personalities and relationships just because there's 7 people on stage. You can kind of just keep it, still focused and simple, but have the world on stage. But that is a lot of staging stuff that applies to the physical space. Yeah, I'm trying to think of something else that's like.
Well, something I do, I usually, if it not much of an exercise. Well, yeah, I guess it's an exercise. Just have them run a bunch of multi-person scenes with what I call a small town rule. Like you already know everything about each other. You know each other. It's a small town. You if you're older, you're aware when this person was born, and you know every bit of trouble this person's ever gotten into since they were a kid. So with that being said, you know this person, so you don't have to ask any questions. So that's the other thing I like to try to eliminate. Like, let's try not to ask any what I call fluff questions, like, "Oh, where are you going? Where where do you work at? Who are you? What's your name?" Like all that kind of stuff. You already know, so we can just discover what the meat of the scene is.
Yeah, I love those exercises too. Are so useful. Doing stuff like that, assumed history with people, and also acting as if it's scripted. Really great ways to like commit to the reality of a scene. Maybe also another thing that I'll throw out there is like sort of similar to the first exercise you described is just being in a group scene and then pick one character that you want to impress and one character that gets under your skin. And I think that like phrasing it that way is a little bit, as opposed to be like one character you love, one character you hate, is a little bit more like maybe nuanced or like it's more subtle, I guess, where like if you want to impress somebody, you don't necessarily lay it on that thick. And if somebody gets under your skin, you might your body language changes, but you're not like gonna just yell at them or start a shouting match. It's more subtle. So I like that, and I think that like that can be something that you can do in a virtual setting or rehearsal too, whether you're using the pretense of like a Zoom call or a conference call, or if you're doing other realities in a scene for virtual. Just anytime you're just shifting how you feel. And then, because again, you don't have to like, I'm just keep coming back to this idea of like, you can keep it simpler as long as you have a couple things, maybe you feel a little neutral toward everyone else, or maybe organically other types of feelings and relationships evolve, but you don't have to put yourself to the task of every single person, in order to do something useful to the scene. You don't necessarily have to do 100% of that work, even though if you can, great.
It would be awesome if you could, but sometimes there's so many characters and people playing multiple characters, that's hard to keep. It's kind of like trying to remember names. If you can remember the names of every character, that's pretty badass. I'm not that guy. I try, but as a defense mechanism, I make sure I establish a character, or a relationship with that character. That way, if I use terms of endearment or something, it comes off more natural.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. So we've been talking about relationships with multiple people, and then you have your character want. A common question that comes up during these conversations with the students is, when do I give up my want? When can I? Because you want to honor your character that you created.
Mm-hmm.
So what advice would you give someone who like, okay, we don't want to have a negotiation going on. We don't want to have that kind of scene because then you're not moving forward. It's just, it's not going anywhere. It's just back and forth. What kind of advice would you give her? Yeah.
I guess a couple things. One, in a sort of practical sense, it depends on the length of the scene. If you're doing a montage with a bunch of scenes, you can do it pretty early or like toward when you think the scene is over. If you're doing a longer scene, you might do it. You might transform or like drop your want or change how you feel about something toward the end, or if you do it early, then you leave room to like come back and have like a beginning, middle, and end of like, I wanted this in the beginning and now I don't, and then look for an opportunity to regain that initial want. But I think in a more general sense, I would say it matters less when you do it than it does how. And I think that the main thing that's missing when for people if they're struggling with that is that like just give it a due time in the moment that you change. You have to like act through that moment and be like, I really want this, and then if it's like, well, you're not going to get it, then to be like, you know, that's all I wanted. And if it's not going to happen, then fine. Yeah. Like we can go to the mall, whatever, you know, like just give it a big breath or beat to like feel the change and act out the change. You know, that I think to me is the biggest factor in making that happen.
Absolutely agree. And it comes with having a strong relationship because one of my favorite go-tos is that line that you hear so often in writing is I normally wouldn't do this, but because, and then just fill in the blank. I normally wouldn't.
That's great.
Normally wouldn't do this, but because you're my favorite niece, I guess is one time I'll go see a K-pop band. You know.
Yes. Yeah. That's great too because it can sort of diffuse something that you might not need to hang on to that much or act that much. It can't be, you know, if it doesn't feel like the most like severe want, you know, that was like, you know, if you're not playing a character who's like super, you know, like a sheltered, pious religious person and you're standing outside of a nightclub, like maybe that's like a big deal. But if it's just like, can the kid have candy? Like, you know, you could just kind of subtly be like, oh, well, normally I wouldn't, but because you're my favorite. Yeah, that's a really great way to sort of give yourself a justification, but also for smaller matters. Seeing a K-pop band is always a good idea. Josh Nichols chimed in to point that out. Hi, Josh. Happy to see you.
I totally agree, Josh, and thank you for your comment.
Yeah. So that I think that's great. So giving up wants though that is a tough thing, and I think that are there ever circumstances where you just like hold true to it the whole time and just like because it feels right, or should you always be willing to let that transformation happen or drop your want?
If it's serving the scene, if it's and because to me, if you created something and you spent a majority of the scene creating this thing, and it's true because you said it out loud, you created this world, you created this character. If you want to change something, you need your scene partner's help. You know, we're creating by committee, right? So if my scene partner hasn't gave me a big enough gift for me to change, it's kind of, you know, and I can't figure out for myself, like, why would this person all of a sudden with no prompting or no environmental prompting or emotional or relationship prompting, why would I drop this? If I'm a kid who wants candy, have you ever tried to talk a kid out of, you know, wanting candy when they want candy? It's not easy, and it shouldn't be. If it's your want, it's a want for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's part your responsibility to look for the gifts, but it's also partly your scene partner's responsibility to give you a strong enough gift for you to switch. Because I don't like it when someone just drops everything they created all willing. To me, it's the same thing as dropping an accent. It's like, well, now I don't trust you anymore. You broke your trust of your audience, and that's not cool.
Yeah, that's why I really like the difference between those two, kind of like having this transformative acting moment versus like just being like, normally I wouldn't, because I don't like when people just drop it and like it potentially could be too cavalier to be like, well, normally I wouldn't, but since we're on vacation, you know,
right.
It could be too cavalier, but what you have to decide is like, how big of a deal is it? Like, just
right.
You don't have to necessarily have a whole backstory of your want locked and loaded, but just in that moment be like, big deal or not such a big deal.
Yeah.
If it's not such a big deal, then normally I wouldn't. But if it is a big deal, then either hang on to it or act the change.
It's kind of up to the other performers in the scene or characters in the scene to give you that gift or to give you an option that's more fun to play. Why would I put down my Super NES controller to go play jacks? That sounds boring to me. These jacks explode. Now I'm all in. Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
And that's great too. Is just giving people a reason, because you can get stuck in that negotiation trap or vicious cycle if you're not heightening, if you're not exploring, like, well, what else motivates or incentivizes this person to make a new choice or to drop their want. They think they like explosions. These are exploding jacks. Which kind of also reminds me, a nice tip or thing to do in a group scene is to try to gift at least one other person with something, because it is also this would help relationships that assumed history that you were talking about with everybody in the scene, and it also takes the workload. It shares the workload of like, okay, well, now I got to figure out what my deal is and what 5 other people's deal is. You can kind of like do things for each other to be like to gift one other person to say like yeah, well, ever since they made you a shift leader at the Dairy Queen, you've just been all high and mighty, and then you have a little piece of, you gave someone else a little gift of information. And if everyone does that for one other person and you kind of like check everyone off the list that's can really, really make things interesting, connected, and easier.
Absolutely. And then your world building, again, created by committee, world building, the fun stuff,
Yeah. 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 What else? Anything else that we should cover with group scenes? Special dynamics like the split scene stuff before we're done here?
Ooh, no, I think we covered it, man.
Yeah. I guess the only thing that I'll point out is that like we're specifically talking about group scenes with characters and whatnot. Our first episode was about group games. And part of that conversation was that some circles or improv communities synonymous. The terms group scene and group game are sort of interchangeable, whereas Bob and I draw the distinction between like you can have a group game that is sort of abstract and not really about like people, characters, or whatever. So since we did that episode, if you want to check out that first episode at the very beginning of the Improv FAQ at length series when it was under that name, there's more conversation about other types of group games in a show that aren't necessarily scenic.
And then we had, I believe we had one where it's just like three character scenes.
Where we discovered an episode about that.
Where we discovered our difference between me thinking my belief that if it's 2 versus 1 and one of these two come over here, then it's still 2 versus 1. And I
believe that there's a special dynamic called tug of war, which is different than 2 versus 1. So if that sounds like a fun debate to you, then please check out the
let's keep that debate rolling.
Episode.
I'm gonna get mugged with that on there. There we go.
And also let us know what you think. Jokes aside, we would love to hear where you fall in that argument, or if you have a different perspective on how group scenes shake down, or how
the exercises. That'd be cool.
Stuff like that. We'd love to hear about it in the comments. You can also email me or Bob at jamesorbob at theimprovnetwork.org and suggest topics and questions, as well as guests and anything you want to send our way. We'd be happy to hear about and keep the community conversation going. So is that everything?
That's everything.
Sweet. Yeah. Then thanks so much for joining. One more shout out to Josh here. Hey, Josh, thanks for tuning in, and I hope you're well as well. And to Pete and to Chris, thanks for tuning in.
Yes.
We will catch you next time on the Improv Network podcast.
Hi, Chris.
I'll never get a hi from Chris.